There is a shadow in the fossil record, a ghost in the machine of evolution. It is the shape of a creature that should not have been. A predator so perfectly, so ruthlessly designed for a single, horrifying purpose that it feels less like a product of natural selection and more like a nightmare that the world, in its mercy, eventually woke from. For a fleeting few million years it was real. It hunted in the sun-scorched deserts of a lost supercontinent, a silent, eight-legged paradox of delicate engineering and savage instinct. This is not the story of a dinosaur or a great shark, but of something far more ancient, and in its own way, far more terrifying. It is the story of the spider that evolution tried and failed to forget. If you find yourself drawn to these lost chapters of our planet's history, to the creatures that defy our understanding, then you belong here. Consider subscribing and ringing the bell as we spend our days unearthing these stories, so we can share them with you. The Karoo Basin of South Africa is a place of bones and dust and silence. The wind does not whisper here. It scrapes, carrying with it the ground-down remnants of a world that died 250 million years ago. The sun bleaches the stone, and the stone, in its own slow language, holds the memory of the great dying, the Permian-Triassic extinction that nearly ended life on Earth. It was in this vast, open grave of a vanished supercontinent that a man named Robert Guess worked with the patience of a monk, his eyes tuned to see what the stone tried so hard to hide. He wasn't looking for the giant lumbering skeletons of proto-mammals that often emerged from these hills. He was searching for something more delicate, more fleeting, the ghost impressions of creatures too soft to fossilize, the ones that truly painted the picture of a lost world. And then, in a slab of dark gray mudstone, a whisper emerged from the silence. It wasn't a bone, but a shadow, a faint, almost ethereal stain in the rock that outlined a form both alien and hauntingly familiar. The stone had given up a secret it had held for 305 million years. The silhouette of a creature that looked like a spider, but was something else entirely. A blueprint from a time when the rules of life were still being written. This was not just a fossil. It was a key, and the door it unlocked led to a corridor of evolutionary history so dark and strange it would challenge everything we thought we knew about the rise of the predators that now rule our nightmares. The rock had spoken, and its message was a name, Idmonarachne. To understand the profound shock of this discovery, you must first step back from that South African hillside and plunge into the warm, shallow seas of the Carboniferous period, 100 million years before this fossil even drew its first breath. This was the age of giants, not of dinosaurs, but of arthropods. The air hummed with dragonflies the size of seagulls, and the forest floors crawled with millipedes as long as a man is tall. And in this world of oxygen-rich abundance, the first true spiders were already weaving their silken empires in the shadows. But they were primitive architects, their webs little more than messy, non-sticky tripwires meant to alert them to passing prey. They were hunters, yes, but they were listeners, relying on vibration alone. They lacked the single most iconic tool in the entire arachnid arsenal, a tool so revolutionary it would change the face of predation on land forever. They could not produce sticky silk. That evolutionary leap, the invention of the adhesive trap, was still an unimaginable future, a secret that nature was not yet ready to reveal. And into this waiting world, between the reign of the primitive spiders and the rise of the master weavers, stepped the lineage of Idmonarachne. It was a creature caught between two destinies, a chimera of ancient design and a terrifyingly modern ambition. The fossil itself is a Rorschach test written in stone. At first glance, your brain screams spider. Its body is compact, its legs are arranged in that unmistakable eight-legged sprawl, and it possesses the formidable fang-tipped chelicerae of a born predator. But then, the details begin to unravel that initial certainty. The most glaring absence, the one that separates it from every spider that has ever lived, is the lack of spinnerets. There are no silk-spinning organs at its rear, no nozzles to produce the protein threads that define a spider's existence. This was a hunter that could not build a web, a predator divorced from the very substance that would come to define its entire biological order. But nature does not create a vacuum. It fills it with something else, and for Idmonarachne, that something else was a weapon of almost monstrous proportions. Its head was dominated by a pair of immense forward-facing jaws, chelicerae so enlarged and powerful they seem grotesque, like a sculptor's first clumsy attempt at designing a perfect killer. This was not a patient trapper waiting for a meal to stumble into its parlor. This was a brute force ambusher, a creature that likely lurked in crevices or under detritus, relying on sheer, overwhelming power to seize its victims and render them apart with those devastating scissor-like fangs. It was a spider in shape, but a tiger in spirit, a relic of a time when the path to becoming the ultimate predator was not yet paved with silk, but with raw, unadulterated force. The creature's true nature was now clear, a silent, heavily armed ambush predator from a lost age. But this revelation only opened a door into a deeper, more unsettling mystery. If this was not a spider, then what in the grand tapestry of life was it? The answer lay buried not in the rocks of South Africa, but in the very DNA of its modern descendants, waiting to be decoded. The answer lay buried not in the rocks of South Africa, but in the very DNA of its modern descendants, waiting to be decoded. To understand the profound isolation of Idmonarachne, you must first visualize the sprawling, ancient family tree of the arachnids, a genealogy written not in names but in genes and shared biological blueprints. Imagine this tree not as a single mighty oak, but as a tangled ancient forest where some branches thrived and others were brutally sheared off by the relentless scissors of extinction. For over a century, paleontologists had mapped this tree based on the solid evidence of bones and carapaces, placing spiders on one branch, scorpions on another, ticks and mites elsewhere. But Idmonarachne was a fossil that refused to fit. It was a jigsaw piece from the wrong box, a creature with the body plan of a spider but the soul of something else entirely. It was a ghost lineage, a branch thought to have never existed, and its discovery meant that the textbook family tree was wrong. There was a secret, dead-end corridor in the mansion of evolution, a hallway that had been walled off and forgotten, and Idmonarachne was the ghost that now haunted it, demanding its place in history. This is where the silent, meticulous work of genetic detectives comes in, scientists who peer into the molecular clockwork of living species to illuminate the shadows of the deep past. By comparing the genomes of every major arachnid group, from the delicate daddy longlegs to the venomous whip scorpions, researchers began to trace a new, more accurate family tree, one based on the immutable code of life itself. And their findings were staggering. They revealed that the closest living relatives to true spiders are not, as one might assume, other eight-legged hunters, but a bizarre and reclusive group known as the whip spiders, or amblypygids. These are creatures that look like walking nightmares, with spiny, whip-like front legs used as sensory organs and a flattened crab-like body built for scuttling sideways through dark crevices. They are predators, but they are also silken architects, spinning glueless mats from their silk glands not to trap prey, but to create safe nurseries for their young. This genetic link was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. It placed Idmonarachne not as a failed prototype of a spider, but as the last known member of a sister lineage, a separate and parallel experiment in building an eight-legged predator. It was part of a clan that included the whip spiders, a clan that had also experimented with the spider-like body plan, but had taken it in a radically different, more brutal direction. So, what did this mean for the world Idmonarachne inhabited? This was not a world of a single dominant predator design, but a planet teeming with evolutionary possibility. The Carboniferous and Permian periods were a grand global arena where nature was running multiple experiments simultaneously to create the perfect land-based hunter. In one corner you had the true spiders, quietly perfecting their silk technology, investing in a future of traps and terror from above. In another you had the scorpions, relying on heavy armor and a venomous sting, And in this forgotten third corner, you had the lineage of Idmonarachne and its kin, the ones who bet everything on sheer, uncompromising power. They were the brawlers, the jaw-snapping brutes of the undergrowth. They were the proof that there was more than one way to become an apex predator on a planet crawling with life. But this golden age of arachnid diversity, this time of multiple solutions to the same problem, was not destined to last. A catastrophe was brewing deep within the planet itself, a pressure cooker of magma and misery that was about to unleash hell on Earth. And in the ensuing apocalypse, the rules of the game would change forever. The age of the brute was coming to a sudden, violent end. The world that allowed a creature like Idmonarachne to thrive was about to be erased. The greatest extinction event in the history of the planet was looming, a furnace of volcanic fury that would test every single evolutionary strategy to its breaking point. In the face of such absolute devastation, the delicate, the slow, and the specialized would be the first to perish. The world that allowed a creature like Idmonarachne to thrive was about to be erased. The greatest extinction event in the history of the planet was looming, a furnace of volcanic fury that would test every single evolutionary strategy to its breaking point. This was the Permian-Triassic extinction, an event so thorough in its devastation that it earned the name the Great Dying. For nearly 1,000,000 years, the supercontinent of Pangaea was tortured by eruptions from the Siberian traps, a volcanic province of unimaginable scale that vomited forth enough lava to bury entire continents, and enough poison to choke the very sky. The air grew thick with carbon dioxide and methane, turning the oceans to acid and baking the land. Rains became acidic, the ozone layer vanished, and the lush, swampy forests of the Carboniferous crumbled into deserts. In this world of fire and brimstone, the rules of survival were rewritten overnight. The age of the brute, the era of the heavily armed ambush predator like Idmonarachne, was closing its final chapter. Its strategy, a masterpiece of power and patience, had become a fatal liability in a world where the very ecosystems it depended on were disintegrating. To understand why this lineage failed, we must look at what survived. In the aftermath of the Great Dying, as the planet gasped its first breath of recovery, the true spiders began to inherit the Earth. Their advantage was not strength, but flexibility. Their secret weapon was silk. This miraculous protein was not a single tool, but an entire technological revolution contained within their bodies. They could spin silken retreats to shield themselves from the harsh post-apocalyptic environment, creating a stable microclimate when the outside world was still toxic and unstable. They could wrap their eggs in protective cocoons, ensuring the next generation had a fighting chance even in a blighted world. And most importantly, they could spin webs, not the simple tripwires of their ancestors, but sophisticated adhesive traps that could catch the smaller, faster, and more numerous insects that were among the first to recover. A spider did not need to expend vast amounts of energy in an active hunt. It could build a single, efficient net and wait for food to come to it. This low-energy, high-reward strategy was the key to survival in a resource-scarce world. The spider's body was not a weapon. It was a factory, and its product was a lattice of survival. Idmonarachne, by contrast, was a specialist in a world that now punished specialization. Its entire existence was a high-stakes gamble. It relied on large, powerful jaws to subdue sizable prey, a strategy that required a stable and complex food web to support it. When that web collapsed, when the large proto-mammals and other sizable arthropods it likely preyed upon vanished, Idmonarachne had no fallback. It could not spin a shelter. It could not efficiently catch the tiny, flitting insects that now dominated the landscape. It was a diesel engine in a world that had suddenly switched to electric. It was a magnificent, powerful, and ultimately fragile design, exquisitely tuned to a world that no longer existed. Its extinction was not a failure, but a testament to the brutal impartiality of natural selection. Evolution is not a march toward perfection. It is a continuous, desperate adaptation to an ever-changing present. And in the new harsh world of the Triassic, the present belonged to the weavers, the innovators, the generalists. The ghost lineage had reached its end, its final member becoming nothing more than a cryptic stain in the rocks of the Karoo. A beautiful and terrifying might have been. The story of Idmonarachne seemed to be over, a closed book in the library of Extinction. Its lineage was a failed experiment, a path that nature explored and then abandoned. But what if the closure is an illusion? What if the death of a biological blueprint is not permanent? Evolution, in its infinite patience and creativity, has a habit of revisiting old ideas, of playing the same notes in a different key. And in the dark, hidden corners of our modern world, there are whispers that the ghost of Idmonarachne did not entirely vanish. There are creatures alive today that seem to echo its terrifying form, suggesting that perhaps the path of the heavy-jawed, webless hunter was too effective to be forgotten forever. The story of Idmonarachne seemed to be over, a closed book in the library of Extinction. Its lineage was a failed experiment, a path that nature explored and then abandoned. But what if the closure is an illusion? What if the death of a biological blueprint is not permanent? Evolution, in its infinite patience and creativity, has a habit of revisiting old ideas, of playing the same notes in a different key. And in the dark, hidden corners of our modern world, there are whispers that the ghost of Idmonarachne did not entirely vanish. There are creatures alive today that seem to echo its terrifying form, suggesting that perhaps the path of the heavy-jawed, webless hunter was too effective to be forgotten forever. To find them, you must leave the sun-scorched deserts behind and venture into the damp, decaying heart of a tropical rainforest, where the air is thick with the scent of life and decay, and where the rules of the ancient world still hold a flickering power. Here, in the deep litter of the forest floor or under the loose bark of a fallen log, you might find a modern creature that seems to be a living memory of that lost lineage, the trapjaw spider. This is not a common orb weaver. This is a predator that has turned its own body into a weapon of astonishing speed and violence. Its chelicerae, its jaws, are not merely large. They are monstrously hypertrophied, often accounting for a third of its entire body length, powered by muscles so immense they require a specialized locking mechanism to store their energy. When prey wanders too close, these jaws do not simply bite. They snap shut with a force and speed that is among the fastest movements in the entire animal kingdom, a blur of motion that can split other spiders and insects in half. This is Idmonarachne's ghost, not a direct descendant, but a stunning example of convergent evolution, the process where unrelated creatures, facing similar problems, arrive at the same terrifying solution. The trapjaw spider is a testament to the fact that the brute force strategy, the path of the heavily armed ambusher, is so fundamentally effective that evolution invented it not once, but multiple times across the vast expanse of deep time. But the echoes do not stop there. Remember the whip spiders? The genetic cousins whose DNA revealed Idmonarachne's true family. They are the other half of this haunting refrain, the living proof that the entire clan possessed a genetic potential for a different kind of predation. Whip spiders are the spectral inheritors of this legacy, creatures that move with a slow, deliberate, and utterly alien grace. Their spiny, grasping pedipalps are not used for walking but are held aloft like the claws of a praying mantis, ready to snatch any victim that blunders into their path. They are silent, patient hunters of the dark, relying on stealth and overwhelming, close-quarter power, a direct parallel to the life we imagine for Idmonarachne. They complete the picture, showing us that this forgotten lineage was not an aberration, but a whole different school of predatory thought, one that produced both the compact, jaw-snapping tank and the long-limbed, stealthy phantom. Together, the trapjaw spider and the whip spider form a chorus of echoes, proving that the world of the arachnids is far stranger and more diverse than we ever believed, and that the boundaries between what is extinct and what is living are often blurred by the recurring dreams of evolution. This realization forces a profound and unsettling shift in perspective. The story of life on Earth is not a simple, linear progression from primitive to advanced. It is a complex branching tree where countless possibilities are tested, most are discarded, and a few are kept. But the discarded ideas, the lost designs, are not truly gone. They exist as potential, as a library of blueprints that evolution can and does borrow from when the conditions are right. Idmonarachne was one such blueprint, a masterwork of power that was shelved when the world changed. But its core idea, the ambush hunter, the master of close-quarters violence, was too powerful to ever be truly forgotten. It lingers in the shadows, a permanent part of evolution's toolkit, waiting in the wings for its moment to return. And this leads us to a final, chilling, and speculative thought. If the core predatory essence of Idmonarachne can resurface in different forms across millions of years, what other ancient horrors, what other forgotten monsters, might still be lurking in the deep code of life, waiting for their cue to step back into the light? This realization forces a profound and unsettling shift in perspective. The story of life on Earth is not a simple, linear progression from primitive to advanced. It is a complex branching tree where countless possibilities are tested, most are discarded, and a few are kept. But the discarded ideas, the lost designs, are not truly gone. They exist as potential, as a library of blueprints that evolution can and does borrow from when the conditions are right. Idmonarachne was one such blueprint, a masterwork of power that was shelved when the world changed. But its core idea, the ambush hunter, the master of close-quarters violence, was too powerful to ever be truly forgotten. It lingers in the shadows, a permanent part of evolution's toolkit, waiting in the wings for its moment to return. And this leads us to a final, chilling, and speculative thought. If the core predatory essence of Idmonarachne can resurface in different forms across millions of years, what other ancient horrors, what other forgotten monsters, might still be lurking in the deep code of life, waiting for their cue to step back into the light? The true legacy of this creature is not its fossil, but the terrifying precedent it sets, that extinction is not an end, but a pause, and that nature's most successful nightmares are never truly erased. Only waiting for their time to come again, we are left, then, not with a neat conclusion, but with a lingering disquiet, a new way of seeing the world beneath our feet. The discovery of Idmonarachne does more than just add a new branch to the tree of life. It reveals that the tree itself is haunted. Every forest floor, every patch of leaf litter, every dark crevice in your garden wall is a landscape populated by the echoes of these ancient evolutionary wars. The true spiders, with their silken engineering, won the planetary war for dominance. But the ghosts of the losers, the phantoms of the brute force clans, still walk among them. The trapjaw spider is not just a fascinating oddity. It is a living monument to a path not taken, a reminder that the potential for that kind of raw, explosive violence is still written into the genetic fabric of the arachnid world. The whip spider is not merely a curious cousin. It is a keeper of the old ways, a testament to the enduring power of stealth and powerful grasping limbs. We walk through a world filled with these spectral echoes, most of them too small for us to notice, but each one a chapter in a story far older and stranger than our own. So the next time you see a spider, watch it not with mindless fear, but with a sense of deep time. See in its delicate, efficient form the survivor of the greatest catastrophe our planet has ever known. See in its web not just a trap, but a technological marvel that allowed it to outlast giants. But also, in the back of your mind, remember the ghost. Remember the shadow that once lurked in the undergrowth, a creature built not for finesse, but for pure, unadulterated power. Remember that evolution tried to forget it, but could not. Its blueprint was too perfect, its strategy too effective to be lost forever. It whispers to us from the rocks of the Karoo, a silent testament to the fact that in the endless patient experiment of life, no good idea, no matter how terrifying, ever truly dies. It simply waits, sleeping in the DNA of countless generations, for the right moment to awaken, and in that awakening, other ancient designs can also stir from their slumber. designs of a scale and horror that dwarf even the mightiest spider. It makes one wonder what other architects of fear have been lost to the deep past, their blueprints filed away in nature's dark library, waiting. It forces a question about a different kind of predator, one that spins not a web of silk, but a web of sheer, overwhelming size and power in the steamy jungles of our modern world. A story not of a forgotten spider, but of a giant that evolution should have left behind. A story of the giant spider that eats birds, and that precise, unsettling question of a predator so vast it turns the tables on the very vertebrates that rule the world, is the subject of our next investigation. A journey into the heart of a South American jungle to confront the reality behind the legend of the giant spider that eats birds. Evolution gone too far? The story of Idmonarachne may be over, but the legacy of the arachnid nightmare is alive, well, and growing to impossible sizes in the shadows just beyond our sight.